Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. I'm your host, Jace. Real treat for you today. We have the creative team for an upcoming book from Image, which is taking a really standard kind of fictional type of character, I'll say, and in a lot of ways modernizing it. So the book is called Bloodstained Teeth, and I have the writer, the artist, the colorist, they're all here to talk about it. So we'll start with a quick introduction from the writer, Christian Ward. Christian, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So if people aren't familiar with your work, you've done so much stuff, I feel like, especially as an artist. So give a quick intro where people may have seen your work before.
Sure. So I'm Christian Ward, this is my second book as a writer. My first being Machine Gun Wizards, but as you pointed out, I'm mostly known for being an artist. Recently, I did The Invisible Kingdom with G. Willow Wilson. Before that, I did The Odyssey with Matt Fraction. I've also worked at Marvel with Saladin Ahmed on Black Bolt, and lots of other things which are leaving my mind right now. But
Fair enough. And what about you, Patrick? Let everybody know where they may have seen your work before.
Mostly, this is my first, Bloodstained Teeth is the first comic I've done without Dark Horse. So everything I've done actually has been with Dark Horse. Actually, that's not true. I did one issue of Nita Ha's Nightmare blog with Jason Sean Alexander and Ronnie Barnes. But before that, I did The Mask, or I Pledge Allegiance to the Mask with Christopher Cantwell. And before that, I was on a pretty extended series of Joe Golem, Occult Detective, which is every bit as awesome and batshit crazy as you can imagine that title sounds. And I was on that for the longest. That was the longest issue I've done. Before that, I did a Hellboy one shot, and I also did a lot of other stuff in the Mignola-verse, like Age Sapien, the Haunted Boy. And the first thing I ever did, actually, the first one shot I did, actually after Age Sapien, I did an Aliens miniseries, actually, and then Serenity Float Out with Patton Oswalt. Right. So, welcome to comics.
Yeah, quite the eclectic list of writers you've worked with there.
And they're all named Chris.
And then color artist extraordinaire, Heather Moore. Heather, where have people seen your work before?
Well, I'm quite a noob compared to these two, so I won't have as many titles to throw out. But let's see, The New World with Image, Lost Soldiers, and James Bond, Agent of Spectre. And so, yeah, this will be my third title with Image. Yay.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, and
that's what's been announced.
And a creator-owned book, and certainly, I love the fact that we have Heather here because so much of the world and the tone of what we've seen is all about the color. It's absolutely amazing. I was blown away by the color work, which just enhances what Patrick is bringing to the book. But let's give everybody the elevator pitch and let them kind of know what the story's about. So we'll start with you, Christian. How if somebody comes up to your table at a con or whatnot, wants to know what Bloodstained Teeth is all about, how are you selling it?
This is how I'm selling it. Okay, so Bloodstained Teeth imagines a world where there's a secret cabal of billionaire vampires, because let's be honest, that's kind of what billionaires are. And they feed not just on our blood, because they can get, blood banks all over. They can get our blood without any problem at all. What they feed on, more importantly, is our money. And in this world, we have a character called Atticus Sloan, who's kind of outside of this world of elite vampires. And he's trying to find his way, and he's trying to find how he can fund his immortality, because immortality is not cheap. And he's worked out that he can charge people to turn them into vampires. But there's a problem, because in vampire law, that is illegal. And that's what the story brings us to. What will Atticus Sloan do when vampire law catches up with him?
There's some fantastic ideas that are so interesting in that. Two things that really strike me about what you said. First of all, this idea of billionaires feeding off the rest of us, which I totally agree with you. Couldn't be more relevant these days. Right? I definitely feel like I'm being drained, when I see somebody like, Jeff Bezos, and I don't know him personally. I'm not attacking him personally, but when his the rest of us are locked down in our homes during a pandemic and his wealth like triples. What else, what am I supposed to think? And the other thing I love about it is it's this idea of Atticus Sloan is not the good guy. He might be the protagonist of the story, but he is not a good guy. Neither are these billionaire vampires, but yet that's where the conflict is. And I think we get to be almost third person sitting outside of it, watching this all go down. So
absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic idea. Now, is this something that you've had? I think I saw you in an interview say an idea that you've been working on for quite a while, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of really came to the forefront in the lockdown because, as you just pointed out, Jace, these things were right there in front of us, and these billionaires are racing to get off planet. You think, why are they trying to get off planet? What's going on? And just pay your taxes and then maybe you don't have to leave and we'll all be okay.
Right.
So there was a lot of anger there directed kind of like towards those sort of people. And I had the kind of initial route of Bloodstained Teeth, the idea of Atticus, and that he would be a vampire for hire. I've had that for about 2 years now. And then it was that final piece of the puzzle, making it like all good horror. You want to be sort of discussing the world around you because, otherwise it's just fluff, and entertainment's fine, but, for it to have resonance, you want to be saying something. And so that was like the final piece of the puzzle, being able to actually say something with this story and actually, have a discussion about something that I think we all care a lot about and we're all quite angry about. And anger makes good horror. And then it was, initially I was thinking about drawing it myself. But as these new elements came in, I realized how much the story had to be rooted in essentially a mirror of our world for it to really resonate. And my work is not really about a mirror. It's more ethereal and kind of like fantasy based and sci-fi based. And I didn't really want to do something. I wanted it to feel far more tangible. And obviously that's why I reached out to this amazing artist here, sat beneath me.
Yeah, Patrick, you're from the preview pages we've seen, very gritty, which again balances so interestingly with what Heather's doing in the colors. So when Christian approached you with this idea and you heard the plot and kind of the bones of the story, were you really excited to kind of dig in and start to world build?
I think I said, when do I start? Like when Christian Ward comes and asks you to work with him, you say yes and then ask questions later, basically, and yeah, it's like I think Christian, did you actually send me a DM on Twitter? Is that right? How you actually looking up?
Yeah, because I think we hadn't met, and I got quite friendly with Chris Campbell. And initially, I was going to be doing a variant cover for your book, The Mask, which never happened for one reason or another. Nothing. it was wicked if it was going to happen, but it never happened. And I remember kind of like Chris and Daniel, the editor on The Mask, sent me some of your pages, and it was just like I just knew straight away he's the guy. And so I just slid into your DMs,
as one does.
Started to smooth and try you out, see what you're all about.
There was very little like smoothing involved. I was just like, yeah, like do it. But he actually, we'd actually been talking for a while before we started working on this. He had a couple of ideas, and this one was sort of one of the later ones that we had. And he said, I was thinking about doing a vampire comic, and I'm like, yeah, you basically just said like, I'm going to give you free cookies for the rest of your life. I'm like, okay, sure. That sounds fine. Like, but he pitched the idea of like, if it was, this vampire bites people for money. And then the elder vampires don't like that. I'm like, God, that's all I really need. And then I just started working on like character designs and stuff. And we went back and forth about like, Christian sent me the character descriptions. And the one thing that Atticus, he said he fancies himself someone who is like David Bowie, but his suits are like he doesn't really belong everywhere he goes. He does not really belong, even though he thinks he's really super cool. Which is like that's kind of how I act sometimes, I guess, like in high school. But like he just and so I started looking at David Bowie's like personas, like the Thin White Duke, and Ziggy Stardust, and I started from there. So I need to have some kind of basis to start, and then I started sending him designs back and forth, and Christian would send more ideas, like maybe more of a Robert Pattinson look. And so I did Robert Pattinson. He's like, no, maybe something a little farther away from that. And we finally settled on somewhere in between like David Bowie and like maybe a little bit like Lucifer from Wicked and the Divine, a little bit. And so we kind of, that's kind of where it all started. And, but he also said something that was very, very interesting. It's like, I want this to be experimental. And I go like, oh, well, what does that mean? And I decided, it's probably, Christian's word smarter than I am. He has multiple Eisners. You listen to him, and then you just, you draw the thing. That's what you do. And then I saw, he said, I was thinking about having Heather Moore do the colors. And I was not familiar with her work before that. And I looked at her work, and I go, okay. But then I saw, like, the actual colors for these pages. And I was like, oh, she is not screwing around, is she? I'm like, okay. It was something I had never seen before. Most of the colorists I work with are, Dave Stewart, who needs to have the colorist award of the Eisners named after him because he works so often. And Lee Lowridge, Dave Stewart, Dan Brown, all of these colorists I've worked with are really traditional. And this was the first time I've seen something that departed from that. It was like it was colored like it was like the first time you heard Pink Floyd. You're like, whoa. You're like, okay. And then it changes the way you perceive everything. Basically, it just changes the way you perceive like what you were doing and what you initially thought, and it takes you to a different place. It's almost like, first time you hear a John Coltrane solo, you're like, wow, okay, I'm somewhere else that I was before I started. And that's what's so surprising and like so motivating about it is, that it's going to be good and surprising at the same time when you get your colors, when you get the inks to Heather. She's going to come up with something that surprises you, but also you're like, okay.
Yeah, you're gonna look good, which I'm so happy to have Heather here because so often I don't necessarily get to have the color artist on. So I want to talk to you, Patric, a little more about world building, as the differences between the character design and actual world building. But I want to go to Heather first because I've never had a color artist on to be able to talk about this. It's a very unique look. It's very bright, this neon world of the vampires, which makes sense considering, the affluent kind of secret world they live in. So is it different? Because I know it is different for the artist that does the line work, character design versus world building. Is it different from your perspective as well? Working out the palette for the actual world, the backgrounds, the settings, the cities, as opposed to the actual color work for the characters themselves?
I kind of took everything into consideration at once on the front end. I feel like I'm quite cerebral in my process. Like I live in the concept zone. So I was bouncing off of a lot of what Christian put forth. And likewise, he came to me and said experimental. So that is like my favorite word to hear. I knew that meant I was going to have some fun. And so for me, in particular with this color approach, one of the main things that I began with was this idea of color hierarchy. So just like sticking with color theory and the color wheel, your primary colors, your secondary colors, your tertiary colors, and then applying those to the characters. So Sloan would be mainly in our, primary color zone, and we'd have some spaces that were outside of that and alleyways that would hit the sort of ambiguous kind of shredded tertiary zones. I was very conceptual in my approach, and then just trying to create a lot of tension between this really sort of abstract application of color to Patric's realism. And knowing that we would, by doing that together, we would create this really frenetic, kind of unhinged energy that you wouldn't otherwise achieve, I don't think. And also another thing that I tried to do here that I haven't done in the past is using a lot of traditional practices to create textures, because I wanted to give it basically visual overload. So this visual information sickness through texture almost, as well as the color palette itself. But so I did a lot of like spray paint and gel plate printmaking and collaging, and you may not know that, but that is a part of what went into my color process too. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I want to ask you, so often colors, I kind of liken the colors in a comic to the kind of the background score in a movie. It gets you excited when the beats are coming, and it can calm you down after a big blowout, that kind of thing. So obviously you're always trying to do that just as a color artist in general. But the other thing about this book is it feels like everything is just dialed up to 11, because it feels like Christian's really, this story is going to be fast paced and it's going to be in your face. So was that something you realized right away with the concept and knew you were going to just push it to the max with these bright, vibrant colors jumping off the page?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it, I mean, I love doing tonal shifts when the mood changes too. So I did want to include some moments, like I said, that were a little more ambiguous, a little more subdued. But yeah, for the most part, I was thinking just like completely deranged and unhinged. This idea of color consumption was big for me, and I got stuck on that. And this idea of like over consuming, that kind of carried my color work through.
So Christian, you being an artist yourself, I give you a lot of credit for realizing, hey, my art style is not the right style. And you also do a lot of your own, you color a lot of your own work. So here you go, you're ready to tell a story that's, obviously near and dear to you, that you're passionate about. And you're wise enough to step back and say, hey, I need a different aesthetic. When you first saw Heather's colors come in, so different from what you've done in the past, color your own work, what was your reaction?
Perfect. That was it. I mean, I think I knew kind of what I was picturing, what I kind of wanted, but it was very much kind of like chaos. I was looking at Batman the Cult.
Okay.
Do you remember and there's sequences in that book where he, when Batman's kind of imprisoned. For anyone who doesn't know, Batman gets imprisoned by this cult, and then he kind of loses his mind, and the colours kind of get trippier and trippier as he loses his mind. And I love it. Love it. It's so good. And also looking at kind of like Batman, again, another Batman book, Batman Year One, there were elements of the colouring in that are quite trippy. And part of that is the printing process, right? It's because how colours were printed meant the colours were quite saturated. And when I was kind of like, conceiving this world and writing it, I watched a lot of like kind of 70s crime movies, French Connection, Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Patrick, if you watched it yet,
I'm working on it.
And I wanted it to have that kind of very, cinema from the 70s was very much about kind of like talking about social things and like kind of social decay, and I wanted it to have that grimy feel. So it felt quite relevant that we would look at 70s comics and kind of have that sort of aesthetic, but then as Heather said, turn that up to 11 and kind of skew it. And I just knew that his art has just got such strong structure and bones, the realism, that it could just take it. We could just throw everything at it and it would take it. And that was really like my notes for Heather, which is like literally there are no rules. Go for it. And I knew, because like her work is, she'd just done Lost Soldiers when we started talking, and there's some really beautiful, and I could see there was some really beautiful kind of abstractions, and she was really enjoying just kind of being an artist. Color artists are artists, and to get the best work out of a color artist, let them be an artist. It's not just about coloring in the shapes in color by numbers. It's about being part of the art. So it was just I knew as an artist she would bring something really interesting to it, and I knew I wanted something kind of wild and 70s and kind of trippy and kind of like using half-tone textures and that sort of thing. But everything is Heather, and I just trusted that she was the right person for the job, and I've been proven completely right.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
there you go with your expertise as a visual artist, because Lost Soldiers was very dark, both in story and in palette. It was
Right.
one of the most depressing books I've read in a lot of, I mean,
It's
anything
pretty,
about the Vietnam War, it's
pretty
going to
damn
be kind
dark.
of,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is completely, you're going crazy with the primary colors here. So kind of fun to cut loose. Going back to you, Patrick, you said yes right away. Any kind of worries at all, being that Christian, he's the writer this time, but he's a visual artist. Have the scripts been different? Has it been a sort of a different level of communication, because he does have that background of being an artist as opposed to somebody else you've worked with, like Christopher Cantwell that you mentioned, obviously, who does, just a writer.
He's awesome. That's all I have. No, well, the fact that he is an artist made me a lot more comfortable right away. It's like the first thing we talked about was like how long it's going to take me to actually do this and what deadlines are. Because
Fair point.
That's if you can't get it done, there's no point in doing it. So, but he wanted to know how long it would take me, and so first of all, I was like, okay, he's really concerned about that, but also he's really concerned about like how much pressure's on me. And so that made it a lot easier for me to say yes, even though I was going to anyway, basically. Mm-hmm. But like, the scripts are really, like, I've only worked for really Dark Horse. So like they're, most of the scripts I see, or I've seen before I got to Christian's, were similar to like a movie screenplay. But what I liked about Christian script was sometimes he'd be like, Patrick, go nuts. I'm like, oh, okay. Are you sure? Like some of the script, you can definitely tell that he trusts like the people he's working with. Not to say that other writers don't, but you can definitely tell that like, he's trying to get you to be the best artist you can be by just letting you like breathe and do your thing. And he trusts to know that. And sometimes the notes in the script reflect that too. Like he'll or sometimes like when I do the thumbnails, like I'll change something just to make the storytelling work a little bit differently, I didn't know what to tell him at first. I gave him like this really kind of apology email the first time I sent a letter saying like, Christian, I had to change some things. Is that cool? Don't fire me. And he was like, whatever you need to do to make it feel better, run better, it's fine. I trust you with it. And so every time I do the thumbnails now, I feel like, okay, I can just sort of, call an audible and like kind of change that there too. And, because I never know, I always think that I am like, I don't have a place to like step on anybody's toes, right? Like I've worked with Mike Vignola and Dave Stewart, and I feel bad. I never wanted to give those guys any notes like, Mike, that cathedral scene was a little bit bland. You might want to like, add some zombies or something. I mean, I don't want to give anybody else like notes to tell if anybody else had to do their job. But, this is a collaborative process. So like, that's what Christian keeps telling me over and over again, is that like, this is not just mine. This is not yours. This is not Heather's or anybody else's. This is ours. And so like, whatever you think will make the collective experience or the collective comic better, you just do it. So that's what I like about it, is that we're not just gunning for ourselves. We're actually we're doing whatever we can to make the best comic that we can together as like a group. Yeah,
the whole will be greater than the sum of the parts. And I'm glad you brought that up, the collaborative process, because that was my next question for Heather. Obviously, you're going nuts. You're doing something completely different here. So you get the line work from Patrick the first time. You do the colors. You pass them back, and then he takes a look at it, and you guys go back and forth. Or how did that collaborative process get started in terms of the way you guys work together? And has it changed? Have you gotten more now that you've gotten a little more comfortable with each other?
Yeah, I mean, that's about right. I receive the line work, and I also work off of the script. So those two go hand in hand for me. And then I send the colors for both of them to review, actually. And they've been really fantastic about giving me guidance and feedback. Every note that I've received has improved the work. So, I mean, just to echo what both of them have already said, I mean, we just really click as a team. So it's all been a very smooth process for us. And I don't think that anyone, feels like they need to hold back. So yeah, I mean, it's just been great. It's been flowing well. And to answer second part of your question about how it has changed, I don't know that it's changed very much. We've just hit a stride, I think. Now where we are in the process, I mean, things are just moving a little more quickly, almost too quickly. But yeah, so it's been great.
Good. That's good to hear. There's always a little bit of nervousness when you put something new out in the world. You guys have all put out comics, you've all created stuff, and there's always that question. For you, Christian, here you are putting out something as a writer, and as we noted at the top, you're more known as an artist. So maybe a little extra nerves there. How's the response been? The book comes out in about a month, everybody, April 27th, and we'll certainly be reminding you, and we'll certainly do a spoiler-free review. But how has the reception been? People seem excited, Christian?
Oh, amazing. Amazing. I mean, I've been doing comics for just shy of 15 years now, and this will be my 6th or 7th creator own book, second as a writer. And I would say this is the most hype I've had for any book. I mean, and consider that I've worked with Matt Fraction and G. Willow Wilson. I mean, that's saying something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, that's because of my, stellar collaborators as much as anything. So it's really exciting. And in answer to your question, is there more pressure on this because I'm known as an artist? I would say, if anything, the fact that I'm known as an artist takes the pressure off. Because in many ways, like, I've made sure that, Heather and Patrick are getting paid on this book. And I know that they're getting paid, they're getting looked after. The work that they do, money goes in the bank, and it's all sorted. And because of that, I don't take any money up front on this book. And if the book completely fails, which I don't think, well, I already know it hasn't. But if the book had failed, it wouldn't have mattered, because, the guys are getting paid, and I'm being paid by my art career, my drawing. So in a way, it kind of freed me up to not worry about, okay, I've got to write a book that will sell, that will be popular. All I had to do was I want to tell a story. And I don't have to worry about that story being commercial. And I don't have to worry about fitting it into a pigeonhole. And this is why I've gone for, Patrick and Heather, because I want to do the story that I really want to tell with the people I really want to work with. Be damned if it's popular, be damned if it sells. Make sure that they're okay and they're being paid, and, no one's doing anything for free or less than their page rate. And I don't have to worry that it's not going to be a big hit. And so it means that the story can be told with integrity, and we can do it, how we want to do it. And I think kind of like readers and retailers and anyone who's excited about comics always responds well to the story that's told, because there's passion there. And so, I'm not really nervous about the book coming out, because I'm really excited about it. I'm really proud of it. And people may not like some of the way that I write, and they may not like some of the stuff that I do, but I know that they're going to like, what Patrick and Heather have done. And if they don't, it's not for them. But we know we're doing a brilliant book. I mean, honestly, I think it's absolutely amazing. It's one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into it myself and to read the whole thing. And I agree with you. We say it all the time, like, creator-owned stuff, the passion comes through. If you guys are having fun doing it, then it's that much more fun for us to read it. Let's go back to something we were mentioning earlier, Patrick, about design and world building. So the difference between actually designing the world and the cities and the backgrounds that these characters are going to live in, and the characters themselves. Do you start with one versus the other? Does it depend on the project? Do you prefer one or the other?
I always start with the characters, of course, because that's where the story centers around, and then I sort of like our character is, well, Christian actually gave me, he mentioned films in the 1970s, which I love. Like one of my favorite movies of all time is Chinatown, because it's probably the most well-written movie out there. There are courses dedicated to just talking about Chinatown's writing, but also like The French Connection. And I don't think this is technically a 70s movie, but Bullet with Steve McQueen. There's a certain feel to those movies that I am attracted to. And I think if you can even talk about like David Fincher, who's sort of like whose movies look like they could be in the 70s because of the way he designs blacks and because of the way he organizes light and dark, you know. And so, like, I do, after I get the characters done, I'm like, okay, so where can I set these people to immerse the reader in the believability of the story? And so that's when I start looking at like environments for them to, or spaces for them to exist. And so I thought, okay, this is going to be a little more experimental. Let's look at Tokyo, and let's look at let's see. I want to say, like, you know, not directed, but the movie, the films of Nicholas Winding Refn. I don't know if I pronounce his name right, but like Drive, you know, and those things, and like those movies, they have a bunch of, like, you know, this is the term that Christian brought up, but I love it. I'm sorry, I'm going to co-opt the Christians. They're very lysergic, you know, in their colors, but there is a contrast there, and like those colors show up because of the light of the blacks and because of the contrast there. And so, like, I think about that when I start like designing things and putting things together. I'm like, okay, so there's if you think about it like a band, like maybe like my work is like the bass line that's where everybody has to pivot around. You know, like Heather could be like the lead guitar, you know, and Christian could be like the lead singer, but like there's like the drums or the bass that sort of like set the foundation for everything. And so I sort of think about like that. Okay, what can Carrie, or what can Heather's colors pivot around? You know, and what you know, how can I actually visualize Christian's words? And so, like, I sort of think about it, and I guess, you know, Christian said there's like such weight visually to the work that I do, and I think that there's a conceptually that makes sense too, you know, because like I feel like this is sort of like a foundation that sort of that pivots around a lot of things, and so like I would search like backgrounds that actually have a lot of weight to them, that have like a lot of like chiaroscuro, as you know, which is one of my favorite words of all time. Like, and so I would think about that in terms of like, you know, creating like visual weight and form and texture and that kind of thing. And I think that like it's basically just to sort of set up for everybody else to like, you know, it's like I'm making like a platform for everybody. But like, yeah, I love the cityscapes and the French Connection. Like there's this whole chase underneath a bridge, you know, and everything is framed by that elevated train track. I'm like, yeah, visually, yeah, you're focused right on where you need to be. So like, I also, you know, make sure I think about it in terms of like, how can I use the visuals to like, or like the light and dark to guide the readers where they need to go or where they need to be read and that kind of thing. So I don't know if that answers your question or actually.
No, it makes a lot of sense. From hearing you talk about it, what I take from it is kind of, so you're setting the baseline mood. Let's use that word of mood. And then we all know that when it comes to human emotion, it's much more complex than, you know, I react to a certain situation and I just feel one thing, you know, I'm just mad or I'm just sad. It's always complex. And so then Heather comes in with her color work and you build on that foundation of mood. So I want to go back to something that you said that kind of ties into this, Heather, which is working from the script as well as the line work. So when you're looking at the script, maybe even before you've seen some of the line work for these scenes that Patric's doing, do you already have in your mind, okay, you know, this is a softer scene, I think I'm going to go with this sort of a color palette, as opposed to waiting for the line work and then choosing what kind of palette or how intense the colors are?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Yes, I do that a lot. So if part of my process is really conceptual, part of it is also very driven by feeling and a visceral approach that does come from taking in the script and considering what the tone is that Christian has already set, and then how Patric has then executed on that. So that is my main launch pad for just kind of considering the overall mood and the transitions between scenes. I could not work without the script. To me, it's vital as a colorist, and obviously could not work without the art either. So yeah, we're all very entangled, I think, in our creation for this book. But yeah, so I'll absolutely start with that. And then, was there a second part to your question, or was that?
No, I think you answered it.
Oh, okay.
You answered it perfectly. And I really do appreciate everybody's time. I'm really excited for the book. I want to finish up here with kind of a two-part question. if you have a favorite character in the book that you like working on for each of your particular parts of the book, and if there's a moment, whether it's first issue, second, further down the line, that you can't wait to be out in the world to get readers' reaction. And we'll start with you, Christian.
Well, I mean, like, I will say that there are two big things in the first issue that we're all like about, that we're like, and all of like our peers that we kind of sent the book out to. I mean, I've had messages from like kind of like the great, I spat out my coffee at this bit. Like, I couldn't believe this bit. And we've been like, okay, we need to make sure that this bit doesn't like leak out. Mm-hmm. And then the way that we end the book, that doesn't leak out, because it kind of, that's the hook is there. So I'm really excited for people to kind of really see what our hook is, because it's not quite revealed yet. So there's that. And I kind of want to say who my favorite character is, but I think we're all going to say the same thing, but I don't know. But I mean, Atticus Sloan is he's my favorite bastard. I mean, like, and that's, I'm completely writing him as a complete conceited arsehole. He's so much fun to write because he doesn't give a shit about anyone or anything. He's really good fun to write, and it's quite hard when you're writing a character who's such an arsehole, and somehow, and this is down to Patrick completely, he's not unlikable. So somehow Patrick takes this arsehole and kind of makes him into this character that you're like, yeah, he's an arsehole, but I kind of like him. And I think that's what the character in the book works, really. So it can't be anyone other than him, because he's the one that birthed the whole thing. So he's my idiot, stupid bastard black sheep of a son.
And how about you, Patrick?
It's going to have to be the character of Joey, which is Atticus's best friend. And he's actually like, Christian and I, when we were talking about characters, like, he is like the Jiminy Cricket character, like his conscience. Mm-hmm. But he's the character who is sort of like the best parts of Atticus. And he reminds Atticus that those parts still exist in him somewhere. And, throughout the course of the story, those things evolve and change, of course, in very interesting ways. But like for him, like, he's always, even though, he's a vampire, and he's like, he's also supposed to be like, not a good person, and he drinks blood and everything like that. But he has a sweetness to him, and he has like an earnestness to him that like I kind of identify with, I'm like, even though things are really terrible, like, he still thinks that there is good in everything. And he wants, even though the worst assholes everywhere, to actually find that. And if they can, we're all going to be better off. And I like that. I like that sense of hope. I think Christian was telling us about like how these days, like, billionaires sort of control everything, and there's a lot of cynicism in this world, in this comic. It can be very, very cynical. But the one thing that is not, the one thing that sort of is that light, is Joey. And that's why I think he's really important, is because, like, he reminds us that, like, you don't have to be, even though terrible things are happening and terrible people are out there, you don't have to be an asshole.
Yeah, it's good lesson to remember. Any moments you can't wait for people to see?
Gosh. All of them. Like, I know, like, there's, it's hard to talk about without giving things away. So right. I won't, but like, I just know that like every issue is going to have different moments that people aren't going to expect. And like I was saying, like, every issue I have to do research on a different thing that is different than the last issue. Like, I have, like, we were talking about researching the French Connection, and the issue I'm working on now researches a completely different thing, which expands our universe a little bit. I'm not going to tell you how, but, I like the fact that, like, every issue is so different. People are going to get a different experience every time, and there's different things that every issue focuses on. It is, of course, it's a lot of work, but it's work that, like, I can't wait to, like, I can't wait for people to experience it. So that's a dumb answer. I'm sorry.
No, that's a great answer. In my head, I'm thinking each time a new script comes in, you must be like, oh, it's Christmas. What
Yeah.
cool thing am I going to get to check out this time?
Christmas not get to work. Where, but each issue kind of ramps up what I have to do, or what I have to show. And it's and so until it gets to a point where it's just going to be like, when you finish listening to that John Coltrane solo, you're going to feel elated. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh man, you had some kind of, you had an experience that that kind of lodged deep in your heart, and you're going to feel differently than when you started reading it. So, yeah. Yeah,
and what's cool about comics is the community. You'll be able to share that feeling with other people that read it. So, what about you, Heather? Favorite moments, favorite character?
Yeah, I will be very succinct here because I think I'm known for giving spoilers, and I don't want to do that. But my favorite character is Beverly. So we each had a different character. This has just turned out that way. But yeah, I won't say why yet. She just is. Yeah, it's everything's good. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of the characters. And I also really love coloring the environments as well. I know we're talking about favorite approaches to characters, but it's just all so rich, I think. No pun intended, but it just
Well, fantastic. Reminder to you listeners, it's hitting comic shops on April 27th. Now is the time to tell your retailer that you want it, because I think because of the supply chain and paper shortages and whatnot, that Image is still not doing any subsequent printings. Yeah, so now's the time. You don't want to miss it before final order cutoff. Let your retailer know, hey, I want a copy of this. Pick which covers you want, which cover or covers. There's some great ones. I'll put a link in the show notes, everybody, to the page on imagecomics.com where you can go and see the covers. Again, April 27th. I really appreciate the time, everybody. I'm really excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We'll go around real quick one last time. Let everybody know where they can find you online if they want to know when you're announcing things or to follow your work. We'll start with you, Christian. Where's the best place?
Twitter and Instagram, it's the same handle. So it's CJ Ward Art. Great.
And you, Patrick?
My name is spelled without a K, so super important. I'm on Twitter as at Patric _Reynolds, and on Instagram, I believe it's at Patrick J. Reynolds. If you just look at Patrick without a K, you're going to find me. And my father was pulled up the birth certificate, so yeah.
And how about you, Heather? Best place?
Well, I don't have much of a presence online, so I only have Instagram, and my handle is HMLM Colors, I believe. I don't use it very much. I will be better at this, I think, in the future. But yeah, so you can also find me, I think, through their Instagram accounts too.
Great. And I'll put links to everybody's social media in the show notes as well, listeners. So if you're having trouble finding them, you can just go and click there. So again, really excited about the project. Best of luck. Can't wait for it to be out in the world and read it and see everybody's reaction. So best of luck with the series. To all you listeners, we want to thank you for joining us as always. We appreciate the support, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.